ولا فلكا يسري إلا في محبة هؤلاء الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء. فقال الأمين جبرائيل يا رب ومن تحت الكساء؟ فقال عز وجل هم أهل بيت النبوة ومعدن الرسالة، هم فاطمة وأبوها وبعلها وبنوها. فقال جبرائيل يا رب أتأذن لي أن أهبط إلى الأرض لأكون معهم سادسا؟ فقال الله نعم قد أذنت لك. فهبط الأمين جبرائيل فقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله. العلي الأعلى يقرأك السلام ويخصك بالتحية والإكرام ويقول لك وعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدهية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضية ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا لأجلكم ومحبتكم، وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم، فهل تأذن لي يا رسول الله؟ فقال رسول الله وعليك السلام يا أمين وحي الله إنه نعم قد أذنت لك. فدخل جبرائيل معنا تحت الكساء فقال لأبي إن الله قد أهوى إليكم يقول إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. فقال علي لأبي يا رسول الله أخبرني ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله. فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وآله والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة وحفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلى أن يتفرقوا. فقال علي عليه السلام إذا والله فزنا وفاز شيعتنا ورب الكعبة. فقال بي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله يا علي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا وفيهم مهموم إلا وفرج الله غمهما ولا مغموم إلا وكشف الله غما ولا طالب حاجة إلا وقضى الله حاجته. فقال علي عليه السلام إذن والله فزنا وسعدنا وكذلك شيعتنا فازوا وسعدوا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة. سورة المبارك الفاتحة.
افضل الصلاة محمد وآل محمد. ایسے ہوتے ہیں علی کے نوکر، ایسے ہوتے ہیں علی کے نوکر، ایسے ہوتے ہیں علی کے نوکر، ایسے ہوتے ہیں علی کے نوکر. دیکھ کر میسمو سلمان کو کہتے ہیں نظر، ایسے ہوتے ہیں علی کے نوکر. وقت پر وقت کی رفتار بدل دیتے ہیں، فطرت خنجر و تلوار بدل دیتے ہیں، دار پر لہجہ گفتار بدل دیتے ہیں، زیر خنجر بھی صدا دیتی ہے حیدر حیدر. ایسے ہوتے ہیں علی کے نوکر، ایسے ہوتے ہیں علی کے نوکر، ایسے ہوتے ہیں علی کے نوکر. تم نے مولا کی محبت کا نظارہ دیکھا، لشکر کفر زیادہ تھا مگر ہار گیا. چند افراد نے لبنان کا نقشہ بدلا، بھاگنے والے ذرا دیکھ تو پیچھے مڑ کر. ایسے ہوتے ہیں علی کے نوکر، ایسے ہوتے ہیں علی کے نوکر، ایسے ہوتے ہیں علی کے نوکر. یوں ہی حیدر کے یہ تبلیغ کیا کرتے ہیں، ایسے دیوانے دانائے عطا کرتے تھے. عقل والے انہیں بہلول کہا کرتے، ہم مٹی کے بنا دیتے یہ خلد میں گھر. ایسے ہوتے ہیں علی کے نوکر، ایسے ہوتے ہیں علی کے نوکر، ایسے ہوتے ہیں علی کے نوکر. کسر بیعت کی ستونوں کو گرانے کے لیے اپنا گھر قلب پیمبر میں بنانے کے لیے، جوتیاں صبت پیمبر کی اٹھانے کے لیے، انہیں ہنستے ہوئے دنیا کو لگا دی ٹھوکر. ایسے ہوتے ہیں علی کے نوکر، ایسے ہوتے ہیں علی کے نوکر، ایسے ہوتے ہیں علی کے نوکر. مر کے بھی الفت حیدر نہیں مرنے دیتی، بات یہ حضرت سلمان نے ثابت کر دی. بعد مرنے کے اگر ان کو بلائیں گے علی، موت کی گود سے لبیک کہیں گے اٹھ کر. ایسے ہوتے ہیں علی کے نوکر، ایسے ہوتے ہیں علی کے نوکر، ایسے ہوتے ہیں علی کے نوکر. افضل الصلاة محمد وآل محمد بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Sayyid Hasan Rizvi, respected elders, brothers, Sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. On the joyous occasion of the birth anniversary of our 11th Imam, Imam Hasan al-Askari alayhi salam, on behalf of the Board of Trustees and the Managing Committee, we wish you all Kushali Mubarak. Surah Fatiha is requested for all the names listed on the screen in Kul Arwahil Mu'mineen wal Mu'minat, Sawab al-Fatiha. Ayat Mayyajibun is requested for all the names listed on the screen, and whoever is in need of it here and elsewhere. Let us all recite it together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibul mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su'. Amma yujibul mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su'. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. Now I'd like to invite Brother Zahir Somji to come forward and address the community. Par Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, salawat.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم મારા વડીલો ભાઈઓ બહેનો અને બાળકો સલામુન અલૈકુમ. And for the English-speaking audience, what's up? The Seniors Committee under the HIC management is formally inviting all seniors to a Wadilo no Vicharo event next Saturday, 20th of November from 2 to 4 p.m. Wadilo no amantran che HIC na management, and I translated the word management in Gujarati, and it came as Iswa Yavasthapna. So, વડીલોને આમંત્રણ છે કે HICના વ્યવસ્થાપના તરફથી આ શનિવારના 20મી નવેમ્બર બપોરના 2 થી 4 વાગ્યા સુધી. This event is for both ladies and gents, and it's important to register for the event. આ મેળાવડો બંને ભાઈઓ અને બહેનોનું છે અને બહુ જરૂરી છે આપણે પોતાને રજિસ્ટર કરે. મદદની જરૂર હોય રજિસ્ટ્રેશન વાસ્તે તો ભાઈઓમાં રિઝવાન જેસા, શબીર જમાલ, ઓનલી કાકુ અને અસ્કર હિરજી અને બાયોમાં માસુમાબાઈ બલવાની, સાજદાબાઈ તેજાની અને તાઝીમભાઈ જેસા ને પરિચય કરવાવજો. It is our humble request to make an effort in participating in this kind of function, as a lot of planning and effort is required. વડીલોની વિનંતી છે તમે પૂરો ઉપયોગ ઉઠાવશો આ પ્રસંગનો, કારણ કે આવા મેળાવડામાં ઘણી કોશિશ થઈ રહી છે. મારી ગુજરાતીનો ભૂલનો દરગુજર કરજો. બધાને આપણા 11મા ઇમામની ખુશાલી મુબારક. અફઝલુસલામ બર મુહમ્મદિન વાલે મુહમ્મદ. I now invite Sheikh Hasan Rizvi to recite tonight's majlis. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة بعد الصلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا والنبينا وحبيب قلوبنا والشفيع نفوسنا والطبيب ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المذلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, salamun alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight we are celebrating the birth anniversary on the 10th of Rabi-ul-Aakher of the 11th Holy Imam, Imam Hasan ibn Ali al-Askari alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. You know, normally when we have these sessions, when we're commemorating a shahada or a wilada of one of the holy personalities, typically what we've been going through, based on the requests from Jamaat members, is to try to give us, some new piece of information that we haven't heard from the Imam before, right? And every time we gather, we've tried to do that. That, something that normally it's unknown, people don't really know it, can you share that information so we can learn a little bit more about the history of the life of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. So I don't want to do that tonight, actually. In fact, we're going to go to a story that pretty much everybody knows about the 11th Imam. And in fact, if I were to ask everybody here, which I'm going to do in a second, about which story, what's the one story, the famous story that everybody knows about the 11th Imam, that's the one that I want to go through tonight. So, now let's see how interactive you want to be tonight. What is that famous story regarding the 11th Imam and what took place? What does it have to do with, right? Anybody, just shout out some keywords. Wonderful. This is the interaction that I come to love, right? Hopefully afterwards they can add in like a laugh track or they can add in some fake interaction afterwards. So most of us have heard this story, right, where something happened, there was a drought, there was no rain, and the Muslims were freaking out, like, oh, there's no rain, what's going on? And then some Christians come and they pray, and then it rains. So then they're wondering what's going on. The Khalif of the time grabs Imam al-Askari and says, figure out what's going on because now Muslims are converting, they're getting confused. This is the story that most of us know about the 11th Imam, right? We've heard it before. And I'm going to retell it just so we get some of the details that we may have missed out on. But, obviously when we go through these stories, it's nice to hear, obviously. There's barakat and there's blessings in that. But one of the other points and the reasons why we mention these stories is so that we can, take some lessons. Like, okay, there's some hidden gem, some sort of wisdom within the story that, we're supposed to learn something from this. And most of you, again, you know the story, right? That basically the Imam had hidden knowledge of how the person this Christian was able to pray and make it rain. And, we'll get to it, inshallah. So usually there's one specific lesson that comes out of there, but most people say it's not really practical in that sense, right? Like, you think about it yourself. From that story, what lesson can you take that you can apply right now in your life? Right? Let's go through the story again. One more time. I'll go through some of the more important details that maybe is missed out for the story. And then we'll jump into the analysis part, inshallah. And then, of course, as usual, after we're done, we're going to have a short quiz on Slido as well. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Okay. So this is all taking place in Samarra, right, where the 11th Imam was pretty much held under house arrest. And they say during the time that the Khalifa of that time was Mu'tamid. And there was a severe, severe drought. So the Khalifa, Mu'tamid, he ordered the Muslims to gather. Now, most of you know that when it comes to mustahab prayers, it's never supposed to, you can't do it in jama'ah, right? Mustahab prayers are never done in jama'ah. There is one exception. There's one salah that should be done in jama'ah. And this is the prayer for rain, Salatul Istisqa. It's the prayer where people get together. It doesn't look like a normal salah. It's more of like a dua, but it's called Salatul Istisqa. So this prayer, you have an imam up front making these certain du'as, and the jama'ah follows along, in a certain pattern. I'm not going to go through it, because the last thing we want to do on wilada is go through fiqh rules, right? But anyway, there's an imam, there's followers, and they pray, and they're hoping that it rains. That's the idea. So Mu'tamid, he gets the Muslims to come out, based on his orders. They come, for 3 days they try and pray for rain. Nothing happens. So, okay. After this happens, right, 3 days are done. On the 4th day, the Christians of the area, they come out, right, in a huge gathering. So like the archbishops basically of the time, all their best monks, and even their lay individuals, right? So Mubahala was just, a handful of people basically, right, that took place there. Now imagine you have a whole bunch, like the whole church congregant coming out with everybody involved. So they come out after they see, hey, these Muslims can't get it done. They come out and they have one of the monks come out in this Christian congregation. He raises his hands to the sky and he prays, and then clouds form and it begins to rain. Now, you imagine yourself in that situation, right? Muslims come together, they're praying, they're trying their hardest, and nothing happens, right, for whatever we're praying for, specifically for rain. And then you see somebody else of another faith coming out. They pray, and then right away, it starts to rain. Wouldn't your faith get a little shaky, maybe? Like, something's going on here. If we are on HIC, if we're on the right path, then how come God's not answering our prayers? Why would God answer the prayers of somebody of a false and fake religion? It doesn't make sense. So, obviously, then Mu'tamid, right, the Khalifa he's freaking out, like, okay, this is not good. Because if people, he doesn't care about Islam, obviously, right? He's this fake, false Abbasid Khalifa. His concern really isn't about Islam and this and that. It's more of a political concern. His concern is that, look, if people start to switch out from Islam to Christianity, then I'm going to lose my power and my support, and I can't do that. So he doesn't care necessarily about people losing their iman in that sense. He doesn't care about their connection to Allah. He cares about his own political power, right? That's the idea. So he knows that he has no alternative. There's nothing that he can do himself. And he knows that his own people, his own scholars, or the bought-out scholars that he had, right, the ones that were on his payroll, they couldn't do anything as well. But he knew that there was someone that could help, and it was the person that he had been keeping in prison, in house arrest. So he went, and therefore he called our 11th holy Imam, Imam al-Askari, alayhi salatu wassalam. So some of the details I'll skip, because I'm going to fast forward and get to the kind of analysis in the lessons. So the Imam, when he hears, Mu'tamid tells him what happened, he said, okay, gather everybody back again, tell all those Christians and all the Muslims, tell them to come out to the desert, and I'll take care of it. He said, okay. So Mu'tamid tells those same Christians, come back out, right? We want to see you do this again, basically, right? It's kind of this open challenge. So when this monk, that same monk from before, the one who prayed and made it rain, he came out and the Imam said, okay, go ahead, pray, do what you did before and make it rain. So as he raised his hands and began to pray, the Imam told the Khalifa, he said, tell somebody to grab his hands right now. So somebody went and grabbed his hands. He said, take what's out of his hands. So the monk was hiding something right in between his fingers, and they found this bone there. And they asked, what's going on here? What is this? He said, hold on a second. Now ask this monk to supplicate. Ask him to make dua now. And of course, the monk tries, nothing happens, right? And of course, when people saw what was going on, they said, all right, what's happening here now? He said, now, watch. Now, of course, the Imam, he makes dua, and it begins to, rain right away. Then the people are wondering, okay, well, what was in his hand? What is this bone? What's going on? He said, look, this is a bone from one of the Anbiya, right? And, one of the Anbiya, and these individuals had taken it from the grave of the prophets. And he said, no bone of a prophet becomes manifested, meaning it doesn't exist except that the ni'mah and barakat come along with it. So this person, this monk had no value in and of himself. But because he was using this wasila, basically this physical wasila, in his hands, then the rain had no choice but to come down. So it wasn't because of this Christian monk. It was because out of honor and respect for just the bone of that Nabi that the rain came down, right? By the command of just the bone of this prophet. So, and then after this fact, the Imam actually was released for a while. The Imam requested that some of his companions also be released, and that was pretty much the story. Now, I want to go into a short analysis, right? Because over here, we hear the story. It's a nice story. And normally the reason that this is brought up, or the sort of conclusion and lesson that's brought up from this story is that, look, the Imams had hidden knowledge, right? They had this great, virtue and power, and the Imam knew exactly what was going on without, having previous information, right? He didn't have to see what was in the person's hand. He knew something else was going on with this Christian, so this talks about his ilm al-ghayb and this and that, right? That's usually, the story and the lesson that we hear. But, is there any practical benefit for you and I with that? No, yeah, it's good we hear about the mu'jizat and the miracles of the Imam. Yeah, that's nice. But if I ask you, how do you apply it in your life right now? A stronger connection with the Ahlul Bayt? Maybe that'll do that, okay. But right now, given today's problems, is there anything you can do with this story? Probably not, right? Maybe. I wouldn't have mentioned it if we couldn't do something with the story, right? Otherwise, I'd be wasting my time. So there are some practical lessons that we might be able to extract from this if you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. All the principles that we can get from this story, you can understand without me even going into details, just by me putting out a question for all of you. I'm going to put forth a question. And just from the way that I'm phrasing the question, if you think about it just for a couple seconds, you'll understand where I'm going with this and what the real lesson perhaps is. What happens when the right stuff is in the wrong hands? What happens when the right stuff is in the wrong hands? So go back now. The literal, application of this sort of question is this. This Christian monk, when the right stuff, meaning this blessed bone of a Nabi is in his hands, yes, the rain will come down, but there is an incorrect or invalid conclusion that's being drawn from it, right? Another thing which is interesting about this part too is think about this. This is simply a bone, right? Just a small bone from a prophet. A physical body part from a holy personality. This is what can be done, and this is how a physical part of a holy personality, of a ma'asum, can be abused. Now think about right now. Right now, people are not using the physical body parts of the ma'asumin. They're taking their living seerah. They're taking their words. They're taking ayat of the Quran in their hands. They're taking the ahadith from the Ahlul Bayt. They're taking their seerah, putting it in their hands, and then giving us conclusions about Islam and Shiism and all of these things. So when this information, ayat of the Quran, something which itself is obviously muqaddas and holy, the seerah, the history of the Ahlul Bayt, their sayings, their ahadith, all of this stuff is put into the wrong hands, you see what people nowadays, even Shia scholars and speakers, are doing with it. So again, you see, a bone is one thing. When you take the living tradition of the Ahlul Bayt, you see the sort of misuse and abuse that can take place. And this is a way that we can think about it right now too. Is just like those lay Muslims, they couldn't figure out what was going on. They see, literally, superficially, zahiran, they're seeing a Christian come out, prays for rain, and then it rains. And then they start to question their iman. Same thing is happening with us right now. Somebody's coming out, grabbing one little ayah or a part of an ayah, one random hadith or one part of the history of one ma'soom, one imam. They explain just that part, they abuse that tradition, and then they try to change the foundations of our own faith. So this same thing is actually happening right now. And the lay individuals who don't know any better, they're being confused by this. And very literally, it's through the wasila of the bone of a prophet that it was, rain was able to come down. Think about now when people are questioning the concept of tawassul itself, right? We're not talking about a literal, if this is what a literal bone of a prophet can do you understand what the name and the maqam and the haqq of the Ahlul Bayt can do when we're using their wasila. Like, we have to be able to understand these historical examples because they will apply to issues that we are dealing with right now. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The beginning of the story too. Initially, it wasn't this Christian that was going out and praying, right? It was Mu'tamid, the false Khalifa, who had said, look, I know that we have something in Islam called Salatul Istisqa. It's a dua, a prayer that's done in Jama'ah for rain. So we had the right stuff. This is something that has been sent down by Allah. It's in our fiqh books as well. You can see it for yourself. This is something that is done. The Ma'sumin have employed it before. There's stories of the Ahlul Bayt where they employ this salah, right? Again, it's the only Jama'ah mustahab prayer that exists. They come out and they pray and then it rains. And we've heard stories in, for example, Iraq and Iran where ulama go out with high-level maqam and stations and they perform this Salatul Istisqa in severe droughts and it rains, right? So this is a gift that Allah has given us. But you see, when this ibadah, this source of blessing and mercy is in the wrong hands and ordered by the wrong person, it doesn't come to fruition. Interesting, right? The bone of a Nabi, when it's in the hand of a Christian monk, who we can assume is somebody maybe who had good akhlaq and was sincere and all that, it was raining. When a false leader and Khalifa uses something sent down by Allah, Salatul Istisqa, something taught by the Ahlul Bayt, he tries to get people to do that. When a false leader is ordering something, you see Allah doesn't allow it to rain. Again, the right thing, the right stuff is in the wrong hands. And you see that sometimes, we ask these questions why, in certain areas or in certain communities, things don't seem to add up. Things don't seem to work out. Well, the question is, are these principles, are these initiatives, are these ideas, are they being ordered and sent down by the ones who are the awliya, the ones who have been ordered to by Allah? Do they have that divine connection? Do they have wilayah or not? Or is it a false leader, a charlatan, a fake, somebody who just claims that they are the leader, right? Who are coming and giving these sort of orders and directing things here and there. And you see, this is why when somebody who, it doesn't belong in their hands, it's the wrong hands, right stuff in the wrong hands, you see, won't come to fruition. Allah won't allow that. But somebody even sincere, like a Christian, when they have the right stuff, even though, it shouldn't be in their hands, when it is there, sometimes the right conclusion comes out. But we sometimes make the wrong conclusions from that and start losing our iman because of that. So what we need to start to make sure, inshallah, again, part of the lessons there, is as we are dealing with all these different issues in our aqaid, in our belief system right now, things are coming under attack. Look, discussion and debate, research, like I've said before, all that is great. But we have to be a little bit humble and we have to be honest. How many of us are honestly able to engage in these sort of conversations? Look, I'm not one to tell people, don't read, don't listen to lectures, don't do any of that. I'm not going to tell you that. But I'm just going to ask you and just humbly have you think about it. If you're going to go and sit and listen to these WhatsApp forwards and read somebody's article or read their series or whatever it is, do you have the background knowledge to be able to see where the flaws in their arguments are or not? If somebody else that you know, a family member or a friend or somebody halfway across the world, you want to engage in a discussion with them, right? You want to defend our traditional beliefs. Or maybe you're somebody that believes in these sort of new age ideas or whatever it is. The question is, do you have even the akhlaq to engage in these debates in the first place? There might be some people who, maybe they've studied well enough. They have some background. They understand the fundamentals of the deen. That's great. But when you see them try to engage in a debate, even our, speakers and scholars, sometimes when they try to respond to these, fitnas that are going on, unfortunately, their bad akhlaq comes out and it makes the whole debate and argument fall apart. And this we have, related to us in one of the narrations attributed to Imam al-Askari, alayhi salatu wassalam, which in some books is also connected to Imam Ali, alayhi salatu wassalam, where they're reported to have said, أَعْدَ عُدُوٍ لِلْمَرْأَةِ غَضَبُهُ وَشَهْوَتُهُ. The worst enemy of any person is their anger and their desires. And usually, when we end up in a discussion or a debate, people get heated very, very quickly. It's tough to control ourselves, right? Because, part of it, it's good. It's good you want to defend your faith. It's good you want to stand up for your belief system. That's wonderful. But if your anger is going to come out, you're not convincing anybody. If your shahwa is going to come out, right? If you're just going to be all over the place and start making ad hominem personal attacks, it's better you keep your mouth shut. It's better you don't engage in the first place, right? The hadith continues, فَمَنْ مَلَكَهُمَا عَلَّتْ دَرَجَتُهُ وَبَلَغَ غَايَتُهُ. So whoever is able to conquer these two things, meaning they conquer their anger and they conquer their shahwa, this kind of individual, their daraja becomes the highest. Their level becomes higher, right? They increase and raise up in their superiority. And وَبَلَغَ غَايَتَهُ, which is, I think, is more important, is whatever purpose and goal and hadaf and maqsad and destination that they had in mind, they'll actually reach it. So again, take it back to the example. When you're in a discussion or debate and something really kind of, like messes with you and you get, too passionate about it, people will see that, look, this guy's getting emotional, this girl's getting emotional, and your argument goes down the drain. It's not going to work out. When they see somebody keeping their calm, keeping cool, giving, logical, rational arguments and responses, then usually that person, depending on who's watching the discussion or debate, I suppose, but normally that person usually comes out on top. Because usually, again, think about it for us. When you see somebody losing their cool like that, there's naturally within us, we see like, look, this person's lost it. And when they lose it, we know from the other hadith as well, when a person is in that stage, part of their aql has gone away too, right? Part of their intellect, their awareness is gone. So we automatically assume that this person who's lost it, they're angry, they're screaming, and this happens a lot, I've seen in discussions and dialogues, is that when we get that passionate, we don't even want to hear the other side's arguments too. We start interrupting right away too. We start assuming we know what the other person's going to say, so as they're making their arguments, we start interrupting. You don't know what you're talking about, stop it, right? And we just interrupt. Qat'ul kalam. Cutting off somebody's sentence or argument is one of the most disrespectful ways to engage in a conversation. It's really not conversing. And it is one of the ultimate expressions of shahwa. So how is that an expression of your desires? It doesn't make sense. Well, think about it. Somebody, friend, family member, whatever, your debate opponent, whatever it is, they're speaking, they're sharing their idea and their point of view. You have your own idea. If you're just ready to pounce and interrupt, what's going on in your head is you're not listening to what they're saying. They might be offering something valuable, but you're not bothering because you're thinking about responses the whole time, right? You're just ready to jump on them, ready to respond, right, and cut them down. So you're not listening to what they're saying, even if they have something valuable to offer. And because of that, what happens usually is in your head, you're thinking, okay, I got a good argument. You can't hold it in anymore. So boom, you just let it out right away. Internally, what you're thinking is this to the other person. You don't say it out loud, but this is what's going on inside. Hey, whatever you're saying is not important. Whatever I'm thinking, whatever I want to say is much more important than anything you have to think about or what you have to say. It's the most arrogant thing a person can really say. Now, again, you don't say that out loud, but that's what it feels like. And anybody here, I'm sure all of you have been interrupted. It's a terrible, terrible feeling, right? It cuts you deeply. You're there, you're trying to share your thoughts, you're trying to share your ideas, and somebody just comes and cuts you off right away. It makes you feel low. So it's a good practical tip for us too. If you do want to engage, even in general conversation, allow a person to finish what they're saying, wait a few seconds to make sure that they're done, and then you want to respond, go ahead and respond. And what they say in terms of communication, I don't say tactics, it's not the right word I'm looking for, but let's be honest, most of the arguments, the conversations are arguments, right? So if you're trying to debate with somebody, then one of the ways that it's beneficial for you, if you're actually trying to respond to somebody's arguments, is make sure after they're done with their side of the story, their points, repeat back the points that you heard from them to make sure that you've understood. It's like, okay, if I've understood you correctly, for example, you're saying that tawassul means that there is no tawassul really, we have to go directly to God. Because, God is not saying anywhere in the Quran that we should do this and this. You're trying to say that God is saying, Ud'uni, call me in the Quran. So your argument is direct to God, not to anybody else. That's your argument, right? And usually, when a person hears their argument repeated back to them like that, they'll say, okay, you got me, you understand me. They're much more likely to listen to you now, right? And now, if you really need to pounce and respond to them, that's when you would do so, right? And it would be good for you if you actually agree with them, then yeah, you could agree. For example, you could say, yes, I agree. If somebody could directly speak to Allah and make their dua to Allah, that is the best way. Of course, the question is, who exactly, who knows Allah better? Me or Amir al-Mu'mineen? Me or Rasulullah? And of course, well, the tawassul argument we'll talk about some other time, but I think most of us have a general understanding of the kind of back and forth. So this is a way that we could start to practically start taking some of the lessons from this story. Let me quickly summarize, and then we'll go to our Slido quiz after salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So the main question was, what happens when the right stuff is in the wrong hands? You say that people can be easily confused, as the Muslims were at that time. The right stuff, meaning the bone of a Nabi, out of respect for the Nabi, was able, through that wasila, it came and reigned even in the hands of a Christian making dua. We have to be careful that we don't fall for false, fake, and abused arguments. People right now, they don't have the bone of a ma'soom in their hand, but they do have their living example. They have ayat of the Quran. And it's not just non-Muslims. Again, it's our own, right? It's Shia speakers who are doing this too. They are taking things out of context. They're holding this stuff, right, hostage, and they are misleading many of our members of the community. So we have to be very vigilant and make sure that we're being honest with ourselves. If we know that, look, I can't handle the debate, then don't bother doing the research. Ask questions, do that, but don't get too involved in this because it might cause you to move away from the fundamentals. If you're ready to do the research, great, then you're going to have to put time and effort. Also, we said that in the same way, Mu'tamid, right, the false Khalifa, he tried to use the right thing by ordering Salatul Istisqa, the prayer for rain, but because it was in the wrong hands, Allah did not answer that dua, right, because it was given by a false leader. And therefore, we have to make sure that when things are organized, when initiatives are taking place, there has to be proper Islamic guidance behind it. That's when you'll see a proper initiative come to fruition. And we ended with that final hadith, which said that the greatest enemy for any human is their own anger and their own desires. We can conquer this, then we'll truly reach our end goal. So we can try in our communication as best as possible not to interrupt one another, to listen to each other's arguments, or if we know that we can't handle ourselves, it's better just to keep silent and not to engage in the first place. Let's jump to Slido now. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Okay, so I don't see it going. Oh, there we go. Okay, so, oh boy, here we go. Assalamu alaikum to everybody, to Muzammil. Do I really want to subscribe to KSI 313 and follow my Twitch? I'm not encouraging that at all. In fact, I would say don't follow their Twitch and don't subscribe to them. Assalamu alaikum, Qambar, UG, NC, and FL. North Carolina and Florida, is that what that's supposed to be? Okay. Assalamu alaikum to communication. Thank you very much for this individual who's always makes their name relevant to the discussion. To Nabil Merji, MMJ, Miraculous, Ammar Ali, Jabir, Socrates. Always good to see our Greek philosophers here. Ahlul Bayt TV, Assalamu alaikum. Although, I'm sure they're going to put a disclaimer that the results of this person using Ahlul Bayt TV's thing won't be reflected and right, it doesn't represent the views and opinions of Ahlul Bayt TV, right? Okay, I'm missing there's a lot of people jumping in. Oh. Salma, Zainab, RJ, Joe, me with 2 E's, Ali G, Foj 313, MashaAllah. Khush Hali Mubarak. Zahra Ali. Okay, I think we've got enough, yeah. We got a good amount today. Alhamdulillah, that's good. Okay, let's get started. Inshallah, good luck to everybody. First question, what does askar mean? House arrest, army, hidden knowledge, or none of the above? All of these are related to the Imam, obviously, and his life, but why is he al-askari, right? Most of you should know this, I hope. I guess not. So he's al-askari because that famous title that we give him, the word askar means army, right? And because Samarra was basically a famous Abbasid barracks and military encampment, he was kept there, right? And they say this was the most severe imprisonment and house arrest of the Imam. See, the other Imams, in a sense, were allowed to stay in their own houses. Unfortunately, Imam al-Askari was taken away from his home, put in a military barracks, right? In a sense, you can think of Guantanamo Bay in that sense, right? Like, it's the worst of the worst. Yeah. Oh, okay, I have to show this stuff. Right, there we go. Yeah, so the correct 32%. The word askar comes from the Farsi word lashkar. True, false, all of the above, or none of the above? Interesting that I actually learned this today too. So it does come from the Farsi word lashkar, right? Lashkar, which is in Urdu and other languages as well, which is coming from Farsi, which means army. So it is true. Okay, next question. Which of these is another title of Imam al-Askari alayhi salam? Ibn al-Rida, al-Hadi, al-Naqi, al-Zaki, or all of the above? Oh, I forgot to put a timer on this one. So I'll just wait a few seconds. Oh, there's the timer. You should think hard about this. I said that and I was watching the numbers go down. Correct answer is all of the above, interestingly enough. Yeah. So a lot of these titles were, many titles of the Imams were shared between many of the other Imams as well, interestingly enough. Yeah. Okay, we got one more question. Here we go. What was the first living creature in space? Fruit flies, monkey, dog, or mouse? I should have put dues-paying member as one of the responses too. So most of you answered based on the way that I think we've all heard. So, monkey was the first vertebrate sent, but actual creature, living creature organism, there were fruit flies that were sent. I forgot when this was. And alongside that, there were some cotton seeds and some rice seeds that were sent alongside as well. Very interesting, huh? Okay, so let's jump to the, you're controlling it. Okay, so congratulations to Ali for first place, 51 seconds, nice. Second place, Yusuf Ali. Third place, Ammar Ali. Fourth place, HIC Youths. Okay, interesting. I don't know if a youth actually put that or not, because I don't know if that's the correct usage of the plural youth or not. So I'm wondering if that's actually youth or not. And number 5 is Socrates. But okay, so some people got I guess it was the last question that tripped everybody up. But congratulations to Ali, first place. Okay, thank you very much. Eid Mubarak to all of you. Inshallah, we'll all see you on Thursday night, if Allah gives us the tawfiq. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala Ahl Baytihi at-Tayyibin at-Tahirin. Salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad.
أفضل السلام محمد وآل محمد Allah mujhe lashkar Mehdi se mila de Allah mujhe lashkar Mehdi se mila de aisa na ho आका मेरा हलमिन की सदा दे नजरों को मेरी लायक दीदार बना दे पर्दा जो परा है मेरी آنکھوں پہ اٹھا دے، ہادی یہ زماکاروں پہ پر نور دکھا دے، اللہ مجھے لشکر ہر ایک نیشا کو پرزلالات کا مٹا دوں، ہر راہ میں ایک دیپ صداقات کا جلا دوں، اس خیر عمل کی مجھے توفیق خدا دے، اللہ مجھے لشکر جو حضرت شبیر بنا دے، اللہ مجھے لشکر دیکھوں نہ اگر اٹھے ہوئے پردہ غیبات، آئے جو میرے بعد یہاں حضرت حجت، تربت میں ابد کوئی میرا شان نہ ہلا دے، اللہ مجھے لشکر مہدی سے ملا دے، ایسا نہ ہو آقا میرا حلم کی صدا دے، افضل السلام محمد و آل محمد. سورة مباركة الفاتحة. زیارت.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أختك زينب، السلام على الحسين والعلي ابن الحسين ولا أولاد الحسين ولا أصحاب الحسين جميعا شهداء كربلاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم يا أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن عسكري. السلام عليك إمام صاحب العصر والزمان، الأمان الأمان الأمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسخر الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك وجعلنا من أنصارك ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل